The tag team champions Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax. They had dueling handicap matches on this show against Ruby Riott and Liv Morgan. Shayna got rolled up off a distraction from Nia in the first match, and the second one had no finish because Retribution interrupted on the Titantron. They were all wearing masks. They had their voices distorted. Two of them spoke, first a woman and then a man. The dialogue here would be laughed out of a community theater play. Here, I can disguise my voice too.
This Thunderdome is only a facade. Behind this mountain of screens is the same foundation, the same WWE as before. The same behemoth who discarded and disowned us, leaving us to survive in an unfair world. Where the powerful continue to grow, while we are left to feed on nothing but scraps of contempt. Then we have the male voice. But contempt is a powerful motivator. We are driven to destroy, to lay waste to every superstar and every fan blinded. You cannot see what you do not have. So the locusts of contempt will feed upon all of you. The darkness of retribution will seep into the pores of every superstar in all of your so-called universe. We are Retribution. God, this dialogue is shit. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. Wait, let me change my voice.
There we go. I almost did the entire rest of the podcast in that voice. Someone on Reddit used a website to edit the pitch for the audio. People did the same thing with the DDP Stalker voice many years ago, before DDP was revealed as the Undertaker Stalker, and you could hear that it was Vince McMahon doing the voice. So it's not hard to do. The man here was clearly Dominik Dijakovic, and the woman was Mercedes Martinez. And with her being kicked out of the Robert Stone brand on NXT this past week and losing that cage match to Rhea Ripley, it sure does seem like she may be on her way to Raw. Dijak, I mean, he's been rumored for Raw since like May. I think that was the first time I heard about him being moved or being called down to the main roster. This angle is just a mess. It just feels like a complete mess right now. If there was any importance to it, and I never bought into it as being anything that was really serious, but you look at some of the earlier angles they did many weeks ago with them taking over the show and ending the show and the chainsaws and the destruction and everything, and it just, from then to now, the volume has just been turned down by 50%. I mean, it just does not feel even as big of a deal as it did then. And I didn't think it was that great then, but some people did. Now it just doesn't feel like it's much of a big deal. This was the week to try something big at the end of the night. This was the week to try something big at the end of the show to get people to tune in tomorrow night against the NFL, and they did nothing. I couldn't believe it. Of all the weeks, you want some kind of like cliffhanger ending and do something with Retribution or tease some kind of reveal finally, the next chapter in this Retribution saga. This was the time to do it and keep people wanting to tune in the following week against football and see what the hell is going to be the payoff to all this. And they did not do anything. They just had this one promo segment, and that was it. Randy Orton against Keith Lee. Yes, again. Talk about Groundhog Day. They had Keith Lee beat Randy Orton at Payback. That was awesome. That was the right move. There was no need to bring this match back for a third time. Keith Lee got a win over an established star, and that established star is already challenging for the WWE title anyway, in a few weeks. Everybody wins. And actually, I have to correct myself. This was the fourth match involving these men, if you count the triple threat with Seth Rollins the week before. This was match number 4. 4 matches with these two in the span of 3 weeks. And this time it was another DQ win for Randy Orton, where when it was over, Keith Lee just sort of rolled out of the ring and disappeared. Another DQ win where Drew McIntyre interfered. That is now the second time that Drew McIntyre has cost Keith Lee a win. And what kind of made this worse was that Orton hit him with an RKO. He hit Lee, dropped him with the RKO, and he had him beat. I mean, when he dropped Keith Lee with an RKO in that 3-way match a couple of weeks ago, he didn't pin Keith Lee. He pinned Seth Rollins. But here, he clearly had this guy beat. He was seconds away from pinning Keith Lee and getting his win back when Drew McIntyre got involved. And this now leads to a match for the first time ever in WWE. I mean, they wrestled and evolved, but For the first time in WWE, we're going to get a match on Raw tomorrow night between Drew McIntyre and Keith Lee, which the best thing I can say about that, at least it's a fresh match that we haven't seen yet. Out of all the matches they keep running back every single week, this is a match we have not yet seen in WWE. But I look at this and I think to myself, there's really no good outcome here. Either Drew McIntyre wins. Well, you know, Keith Lee put up a hell of a fight, yeah, but he still loses because Drew is the champion. And you're not going to pin your champion. I mean, that's just dumb. Keith Lee wins, which would be nice, but he's not in the title match at Clash of Champions, so you can't beat the champion. Or, the most likely scenario, we're getting a screwy finish. Now, what's the solution to this? The solution to this is to add, especially if you're going to do a screwy finish, you add Keith Lee to the match at Clash of Champions. Keith Lee has no other obvious match. He's been involved with both these guys. You add Keith Lee, you make it a triple threat match at Clash of Champions. And make sure that it's Randy Orton who gets pinned again by Drew McIntyre and not Keith Lee. So that at least protects Keith Lee from a pinfall loss in a big match, and it could preserve him for a singles match for the championship later on. That is probably the best scenario out of this, but there is another alternate scenario that I would pitch to you here, and that involves Retribution. While I am not the biggest fan of Retribution, there is still time to pay this thing off in a way that actually is kind of compelling and kind of interesting, and maybe it actually helps get a few people over. And one of those people could be Dominik Dijakovic. Now, I don't know if Mercedes Martinez and Mia Yim and, you know, Vanessa Bourne and some of these people that have clearly been under the masks. Mia Yim did not speak, but clearly she was one of the masked people. You could just tell by the eyes on Raw last week. That doesn't mean that all of these people are going to be unmasked when the time comes. So I don't know if we're going to see Dijakovic and we're going to see Mercedes Martinez. I would think the two of them will be under the masks when the reveal happens, because it just seems like Mercedes is moving on, you know, to a different brand, and Dijakovic has been rumored for Raw anyway. I can't speak to the others. But even if it was just someone like Dijakovic, you know, the last time we saw him on TV, he was being killed by Karrion Kross on NXT while his best friend, Keith Lee, stood by and watched. Now, you know, Dijakovic did tell him, stay there, don't get involved, I don't want your help. But that was the last image we had, was this guy getting killed on TV while Keith Lee stood there and watched. So if he's got a bone to pick with Keith Lee, coming to Raw, leaving him behind, then that could be Keith Lee's next feud. And that leaves Drew McIntyre alone to go off with Randy Orton for their match. And instead, Lee now starts something with Retribution and with Dijakovic. That could be another direction that you branch off into, but you got to do the reveal. The reveal, at least of Dijakovic, would have to happen on TV tomorrow night. Maybe you don't reveal every member. Maybe you reveal one member per week. One member every other week. Drag this out a little bit longer, but there's got to be some kind of reveal. There's got to be something that happens on this show tomorrow night in order to kind of kick things off.